Welcome back to the PeopleNova Podcast. I'm Rachel O'Neill, and today we're discussing fear. What is fear? Fear is a strong emotion, a physiological response originating in the amygdala. Fear aids in triggering the fight or flight response when perceiving physical threats. Think about the hunter-gatherer being confronted with a lion. But what else is fear? Fear could be false evidence appearing real. We can choose to believe false evidence, or we can choose not to believe the self-talk swirling in our brain. We can short-circuit the looping negative self-talk, push through fear, and reframe rejection as a learning opportunity. What can I learn from this situation? What did I learn from this situation? Today on the podcast, we're chatting with the founder of a business that teaches real estate investing to Black and Brown youth. We touch on a few strategies to build wealth. We chat about artistic and creative expressions, and we discuss the courage to be fearless with Pamela Rosario Perez. Welcome everyone to the PeopleNova Podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill, and I am here today with an amazing human, Pamela Rosario Perez.
Hi everyone. So my name is Pamela Rosario Perez. Pamela Michelle Rosario Perez, if you guys want to go off of the birth certificate. And yeah, I am a program manager of customer experience at a cybersecurity company. And I'm also the CEO founder of a real estate investment group.
Yeah. So I love your story. I love your narrative. But I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your work in real estate and your work with youth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Where do I start? Basically, I was born in the Dominican Republic. My grandmother from my dad's side was the first one to come to the United States. So already from like a very young age, I was just like, I would idolize her. And I'm like, oh my God, like, even though I was born in the capital of DR, we were raised in a village called Sonador de Bonao. Like literally had no concrete, like paved roads or any of the sort. We had an outhouse, like we didn't have indoor plumbing, like that kind of house. And knowing that as a woman in the, like late 70s, early 80s, she left a village to come to the United States on her own to try to make it. I was just like, oh my gosh, like
that's so much courage.
I know, so much courage, so unexpected, totally against the grain as far as what women are allowed to do or what is deemed proper for a woman to do in Dominican society. So I already had that fire of like, wow, like I want to be a provider. I want to be like an icon like her. Like I want to break ground and allow for people, whether it's family or others around me, to come with me. Like I want to bring others on this journey.
Yeah.
So,
did she know that she was a trailblazer, or like, did she just do this? Like, what was her motivation?
You know what? I asked her a few times because it's even when raising me, she, as most typical parents, they, in Dominican culture, they still want you to be like a good wife, like, grow up to be a good caretaker. And I was like, but agüita, like, which is what I used to tell her. I'm like, you're completely different from all the
wait a
women
minute.
around you.
You say this and you're doing this. Like,
right.
Help me out.
Right. And when she would tell me what happened, it was just incredible how humble she was about it. It wasn't like, oh, I had this dream. It was like, well, no, I just did what I had to get done in order to help my family, come out of our village and have better opportunities. At the time, she didn't have, I would say, like, the verbiage to be like, oh yes, economic empowerment or financial literacy or whatever the case may be. She just said, hey, every generation, we need to strive to get a little bit better. So, her coming from an even poorer village into this better, more established one, she was like, okay, this is great, but we need to strive for more. We need to do more. What else can we do? So she was very much that person who, I feel like through her example, I learned about just, making sure that I am educated about my rights, what things are available for me, what opportunities exist, and capitalize as much as I can from opportunities that don't restrict women, people of color, queer folks, or anybody from accessing, economic opportunities or a chance to work at a place that we've never been there before. So she was just very much that person who, through her example, taught me to like be fearless and just break ground. And if you've never done it before, who cares? And if you fail, okay, great. Then you'll be broke. we've been broke all of our lives, so who cares? So it's like when you weigh the pros and cons, it's just pros.
Yeah.
It's just pros.
And it reminds me of that phrase that you hear a lot, like, if you don't ask, you're going to get a no. But if you do ask, you might get a yes, but you might get a no. Like, you might still be in the same position,
right.
But if you never ask, then you never know.
Right. I had graduated Harvard and I was homeless a few days after. And I realized that for me to really build wealth or build a career for myself, really break ground, I would have to be extremely intentional and strategic. That's when I started doing my research. I started looking at, high net worth individuals. And I decided, hey, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, et cetera. And I was like, okay, some of these people are building their initial wealth from tech or whatever the case may be. Maybe it was a book that they wrote or a movie that they directed. But at the end of the day, what they all share in common is that a lot of their wealth is held in real estate. So as soon as I found that out, I just started reading as many books as I could. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, How to Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, just so many of these books. And I started sharing with my friends and I was like, hey, y'all, like, let's learn together. Did you know about this? Did you know about that? And then I simply decided to start a business. And you know what? I'm really glad, even though it's been a work in progress, but I'm so glad that I just launched it when I did. And I've been able to have these learning experiences because I really brought a group of people with me on this learning journey. And I also really tapped into my resources. And I feel like we've also been able to, of course, me learn from them and them learn from me, because I will say there was a lot of people who did not believe that this would be a successful enterprise. And I am just so proud to say that we have, over $1 million in assets and that we are thriving, and that I just got 2 other contracts this morning and I'm like trying to figure out how to scale.
Yes!
Like, that's what I'm struggling with. It's hard and I'm learning every day, but what fuels me is the fact that I am taking everything that I'm learning about building wealth through real estate and tapping into funds that exist for us and we just don't know, and sharing that with communities that have been historically disenfranchised and have been disconnected or cut off or pushed out from being able to enjoy home ownership and being able to rent out units or work with the zoning board and, all of these things. So that's what gives me energy.
That's awesome. There's 2 things that you said that I want to go back to. One was your secret about like building wealth through real estate, and like, did people know about this? It is a way to have a vehicle for building wealth. When I bought my first home, it was a train wreck. And my dad was like, no, buy a 2-family. And I'm like, I can't deal with it. I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want to deal with, someone else's toilet breaking at 2:00 in the morning. And like, what am I going to do about it? Right? Like, it just seemed so overwhelming to me at the time that I'm like, nope, done. Like, that's somebody else's. So I bought a 1-family condo, had to sell it underwater, and it was tragic. And I've not owned since. Right? So like, yes, if it's a long-term play, like rental and properties and real estate, not being in the market, you're in the market. It seems like a long-term play.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, being a landlord is not for everyone. And what I teach some of my students is that they should first, have some moments of reflection and introspection and identify, what are my natural abilities? What are my natural talents? What do you do that you lose time, you lose hours because you're having so much fun and you're doing that thing? What is that thing? Beautiful. And some of them will be like, well, I feel like my parents call me lazy because I'm always on my phone on social media, just posting stuff. Or some are like, well, I like to make music, etc. We start having these conversations, especially because we're working in this like immigrant background. And there's a few things that I've had to talk to them about, like things that are cultural assets versus cultural barriers. So sometimes in our families, we tell kids who ask a lot of questions, hey, you're being too nosy. basically you're not being respectful because every single time we give a command, you have a question about it, or you like want to negotiate or whatever the case
But
may be.
isn't that also curiosity?
Right. I'm like, curiosity is a great thing.
It's a great thing.
Please do not stifle your kids' curiosity. Also, I'm like, it's not you being a term in Spanish is like a bochinchera or like a chismosa, like you're being nosy or it's a bad thing to ask questions. That means you're inquisitive. That means you're curious. That means you may be a good investigator. Yeah. I actually have a person that's like that who I now have helping me evaluating my deals because she asks a lot of hard questions.
Brilliant.
For the girl, for example, who had told me like, well, like she has a bad rep in her family because she's just, hooked on social media. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give you a job. So now she does my social media for,
awesome.
The marketing for Rosanna Real Estate. And same, I feel like there's a lot of natural abilities that we have. And sometimes, and I don't want to blame parents because at the end of the day, I know everyone is like just doing their best with also what they were taught. So it's just like, I tell them, hey, everything is about framing at the end of the day. And there's a lot of natural abilities that I feel we have and resilience and amazing things that we have that are actually profitable. And I think like, that's the bridge that people like don't get. They sometimes see these things as like cultural barriers. Maybe you have an accent and I'm like, sis, you speak 5 languages.
That's amazing.
That is a huge asset. That like, who cares about your accent in English? Everyone has an accent, right? Translate my Facebook pages in multiple languages.
That
right?
is
like,
value.
Exactly. Like, and just teaching them how to frame and better understand their natural abilities and how to profit off of these things has been incredible. And I feel like at the end of the day, at the root of what I do, that is really like the key. That is like my main goal. So if people want to go ahead and really go into real estate or go into stocks or start trading, doing other things, fine, I'm happy. But I'm like, if being on the phone all the time and putting, stopgaps and like trading stocks is what you like to do it. Let me get you on Stash. Let me get you on this other thing. Let me connect you with someone. So yeah, that's the quick and dirty there. But I will say that in real estate, something that people think at times, I feel a misconception is that the only 2 paths is like being a flipper, fixing and flipping, reselling for a profit, or just being a landlord. And no, there's so much. There's people who wholesale, you basically get a home, let's say, or a property under agreement, and then you go ahead and sell it to someone else. And it's almost like a referral fee, like a finder's fee that you can get for that. And with that, you don't own any homes. You're literally like doing someone a favor. I actually pay a painter to do that for me. He'll just like, for some of his clients, he'll be like, they want some construction done. They want their stairs done. And I pay him a finder's fee for doing that, and that's one way that he's making money. He's making at least $2,000 every quarter off of me. That's because he's so great at, keeping in touch with people, checking in on his work, and then saying, hey, you want other stuff? I can actually connect you with someone who can do masonry or.
Right. So building relationships, knowing the other skills, knowing what you're good at, knowing, if you're good at painting or if you're not good at masonry, like, great, who else is good at masonry? Right. Like I love it. It's the intentionality and the reframing of like, what am I good at? Where do I get in that flow state of I lose time? Right. And how do I use that to my advantage? And that's what everybody's doing. Like, everybody's trying to figure out how to use our natural skills. And this is the, like, I don't want to be cliche and I don't want to roll my eyes, but I think sometimes there's societal pressure to like, find your passion. And that's amorphous. And it's like, I don't know it's like an elephant. Like, I don't know what the first step to eat an elephant is, right? Find your purpose, find your passion, right? But I like how you phrase it. Like, where do you just go and like spend hours and hours and hours, right? Like, where do you lose track of time? And like, how do you position that and reframe? Because we all reframe and we all position, right? It's not lying. It's not deceitful, right? It's just saying, hey, look, I'm good at translating things into 5 languages. This is what I'm good at.
With some of the kids that I work with, similar to my parents, we heard that for you to make it in America, the passion that you have to find is a passion that is profitable in the sense of that it fits this capitalist mold, right?
Yes.
Something where you're making a lot of money. So lawyer, engineer, doctor, anything else, you're crazy. You want to be an actress? You're crazy. You want to be a singer?
There's no money in
you
acting.
Definitely lost your mind.
There's no money in writing. What do you think you're going to do with a literature degree? Right.
Right. Oh, you want to write poetry? That's so stupid. And I'm like, no.
It's impactful.
Right, exactly. It's impactful. And I think we definitely do a disservice to our youth when we sometimes say, no, like, find your passion, because sometimes we also force people to think about, for the things that exist, out of all of the things that I do know that are careers, what do I love the most? And it is forcing a love that is not there. Whereas I feel if you kind of reverse engineer it and you start with the, okay, you know, what I love most is claymation. Hello, we had a whole series called Gumby that I watched growing up. Like, that person made buku bucks. Like, they made millions off of Gumby. So it's just like, there is something there. And I think that we need to, just as a whole, whether people are mentors or parents, you have a niece, a nephew, whatever the case may be, empower people to just explore and create what their dream job or dream occupation or what their life will look like. Because when I think about, you know, people like Mark Zuckerberg and some others, they literally started out things out of need, right? Like, at first Facebook he wasn't thinking of like, and I want to have advertisements and I want to do this.
No.
Do that.
He made shit up. He made shit up, and he's now a millionaire.
Right. Now he's probably like a billionaire. We look at the numbers.
Okay, yeah, sure. Whatever. I have numbers.
Right. So many other people that are now in these roles, even customer experience
that never existed.
Right. So it's just like, that's why I hate when people tell folks like, you know, out of these careers, pick your passion. And I'm like, don't do that, because those careers may not even exist in 2 years. That's the reality of it.
Totally. And it's about understanding, you know, what are you good at? What brings you joy? Where do you lose time? And what are you not good at? And those are the things you delegate. And I like to teach my clients in my workshops of strengths and say, you know what, if you are really good at being a bunny rabbit, don't try to learn how to swim. Like, be the best bunny rabbit you can be and enjoy like hopping on land and eating grass and whatever. But, and that's where a lot of like workplace conflict comes in, when a hiring manager comes to me and says, oh, this bunny rabbit can't swim. And I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, did you need to hire someone who could swim? Because that's on you. And like, okay, let's figure out, how do we sort this out? Is this skill still needed in our organization? But it's also taking some of the reflection of like, where do I find joy?
So even when I've spoken to students about joy, and for me, honestly, at first, to like prioritize joy over the safety and stability of your family, because in some Latino cultures and in some other, you know, we have this idea that it's like we have to sacrifice, especially for women, we have to sacrifice for our families. Nothing that we do should be out of like to find joy or to find purpose for ourselves. It needs to be to provide for your family. That's the focus. Who cares about your personal joy or entertainment? That's, you know, last on the list. So when I tell them like, no, by you finding your joy, you finding what you love to do, everyone else will be happy around you. And like, I tell them all the time, I'm like, how can you pour out of an empty vessel? How in the world are you to be helping other people, spreading joy or ensuring the safety and happiness and whatever of your mom, your dad, your partner, your kids, if you yourself are not happy? How do you yourself giving sound advice, whether it's about overcoming mental challenges or about being able to do, you know, your schoolwork or having a difficult conversation when you yourself don't know how to do those things?
I call it leaky cup, right? Like, if you're not able to protect, you know, this inner resource, this cup of joy, there we go. Let's hashtag that. Right. And it starts to leak out. You're always drained, and you're just emotionally and mentally and just physically just drained all of the time, because I have felt that I don't have kids, I don't have a husband, right? But like, I have felt in my work, in my life, I am constantly giving to others and not replenishing myself. And I think from a place of what I had to live and retrain my own neural pathways to be like, you know what, self-care is not selfish. And I'm going to take care of my cup of joy before I can help anyone else's cup of joy.
Yeah.
But let's all agree, our individual cup, it's important to us.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I know that like with some people, even with some parents, when I've done workshops, they're like, well, you're telling my kid to not be family oriented. And I was like, no, people
Different.
get very, very defensive. And it's like,
yeah,
it's not about being like individualistic versus family oriented. It's actually not that. I tell them that by focusing on yourself and pursuing what you love most, it's just an avenue to be even more family oriented so that you can show, through your example, how to, let's say, be a stable person or be well-rounded or be independent, whatever the case may be. Because of course, kids rebel when they hear something and they see something else.
Yeah.
Right? But so I'm like, how wonderful would it be for your children or the people around you to have an experience with you where what you say matches what you do, and your experience is a living testimony of your happiness. You don't even have to give advice. It just radiates out of you. So,
yeah,
it's been interesting work with parents, but I'm so happy. I had 2 of my students buy properties this year. And I'm coaching currently an immigrant family to acquire property. Hopefully the goal is January 2021. They're working on their credit right now. And, I love it when it like finally makes sense, because the thing is that this is not news. Like I didn't discover something that was but it's something that a lot of other people know that I feel we have just been disconnected from, and we have been fed a lie in order to fuel the machine. Oh no, absolutely. You have to take these like low paying jobs. The only thing that you can do is be a housekeeper. The only thing that you can do is be, a mechanic or whatever, when that is not the truth. We can be business owners. I literally did not know that Black people or immigrants could buy a house in America. Like, I had to read that and do my research. I really did not think that I could. I simply thought that it was something for white Americans.
So I learned a really interesting trivia fact, which blew my mind, because I grew up a white woman, right? And I had Shonda Lewis come and talk to my university class and talk about the systemic racism that started way back with the GI Bill, and how it was designed to give soldiers returning from the war access to capital to buy houses and start a family. And yet Black people were deliberately excluded from that. I was like, I don't want to swear. I was like, you've got to be shitting me.
All the expletives.
All of them. Like, it's where my Tourette's comes out. I was like, oh my God.
No, absolutely. And not even taking into account. So there's absolutely that. And there's also all of these other policies that have existed, sometimes by county, sometimes by town, sometimes by the entire state. I believe Oregon was one of these at one point, who completely banned people of African descent from owning property. And they would sometimes even have curfews for people where if you were Black, you were not allowed to be out in these streets past 7 p.m. And, and it kills me when people sometimes say, well, Latinos or Black people, I just don't want to own property. I just don't have money. You don't know how to manage. And it's like,
that's not it.
Let me sit you down and tell you a little bit of history. That is why I definitely punch the fact that these groups of people have been disenfranchised. We have been purposely disconnected and ejected and rejected. Like the fact that people have, when you look at the news and the whole college scandal is pretty interesting, because I think about so many Black women who have gone to jail for literally registering their kids in a better school system. And they went to jail because they lived in a different neighborhood. And that wasn't the school that they were supposed to. And now there are these people who are literally scamming to get their children into college.
Sorry, there's white people who are scamming. I'm totally going to go there because that's okay. I'm going to swear.
Yeah. And
I need to stop.
Like, And it's absolutely ridiculous that with some of those people we're like, oh, well, I mean, I would do the same, but for the Black mom who's hustling and busting her butt to make sure that her kids are getting a good education, and it just happens that she doesn't live in a good school district because she can't afford $2,400 for a 1-bedroom, like, she should definitely go to jail. What a liar. Like, those things just like piss me off so much. And that is the reason why I speak to people about systemic racism, about all of these different rules and laws, legislation, the fact that like even police were used to kick people out of certain neighborhoods. The fact that even like Brooklyn had such a big like fight when Black people started to, enter the neighborhood and buy properties there. A lot of the white and Jewish folks try to kick them out, try to intimidate them. We're beating kids up. Like, it's real. And people sometimes think like, oh, just back to slavery. Slavery was a really long time ago. Like, get over it. And I'm like, do you guys not remember about like Jim Crow laws? Like, there's a lot of these policies that still exist to this day. Even
it's systemic. We can't get over it. We have to break the system.
Exactly. You need to break the system. You need to call these things out. You need to organize. We need to get together, build our own businesses, build our own things, grow them, and really work as a community. And I'm not saying that we have to all of a sudden become super insular and not connect. Obviously, we have been able to do so much with the help of allies. Allies are absolutely welcome and necessary in every way, right? And it's not just on the whole white-Black spectrum, but on, ability, intellectual connections. If you're a lawyer and I'm not, let's link up and help me, teach me about the law. If you're a doctor, teach me about healthcare, et cetera. But like, let's all come together and just build policies that make sense for the whole. Because in the same way that dichotomy of the woman does this, the whole gender role thing, and the man cannot show emotion. He needs to just be a provider. Like, that's unfair for both. These sort of rules are unfair for both of us. It's for all of us. So that's why, I definitely stress the fact to people like, hey, you having this feeling that there is no place for you in the arts. There's no place for you as an actress or as a singer, as a whatever. Reject that and rebuke that fear, because it's an absolute lie. And it was put into our DNA long time ago to keep us, very much in control and under a particular
it's definitely a control dynamic. It's absolutely just a horrific control dynamic. My second point from like way many minutes ago was the constant feeling of being rejected, right? Like when you first started your business and you got a lot of no's, right? That has feeling and emotions. And then we just circled back to like this constantly, systemic sense of rejection. And so folks who constantly feel rejection have that pattern in their brain, right? Like their brain has taught them that. And it takes a lot of emotional energy to retrain neural pathways. There's neuroscience that says that, right? But the brain does have plasticity. It can certainly do that. And I think that's why some of these frameworks around being vulnerable, the amazing work of Brene Brown, being empathetic and having emotional intelligence, creating psychological safety in the workplace, in the home place. I think those are really important frameworks to help our brain kind of navigate the like, I've been rejected and I've been held down for so long that I can't, like, how do I not believe that? And how do I think differently about it? Yeah. And it takes a lot of emotional lift, and you got to protect that cup.
Yep. The cup of joy.
The cup of joy. Here we go.
Side, the cup of joy.
So if we ever play charades, this is the cup of joy. Okay, great. Got it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other thing that I had to learn was that rejection is normal. Like, and I know that sounds extremely simple, but I've noticed that for a lot of even the some of my friends and peers who also came from super low income or immigrant, backgrounds, we want to do so well and we want to make our parents so proud that we're like, oh, even one rejection. It's like, we internalize it and we feel like it's a no, not a momentary no, but like a lifetime no. Like you failed. You're not good for this. You're not meant for this. You don't have the ability. And that is not at all what
it's
it means.
not true. Yeah. No.
That's not what it means.
And I'm a bad person, which is not true, right? It's a no, this deal, this transaction just wasn't a right fit. I got rejected yesterday and I hurt. Oh my God, it hurt. And I walked away, I was like, that's okay. Like I learned, first of all, it was a quick no, right? But then I was able to keep the conversation going and be like, okay, but what are you looking for?
And then you learn. And then
I learned.
Because you could use that to then reframe your contract or your SOW, your scope of work, and say, okay, does this fit? Or even just learn a little bit more about that target audience. Oh, okay, now I learned that, parents of kids under 6 years old, like this is the way to work with them, or like this is a clause that they would want to have in the contract, whatever the case may be. So it's like, there's always a learning opportunity, even in a no, a no just means that they don't agree with those particular terms. So that just means that you got to negotiate. You got to sweeten the deal and go back to them. It's a great segue because I was advocating on behalf of Artisans Asylum, which we are both on the board of Artisans Asylum. It's a wonderful makerspace here in the greater Boston area. And we're going in for a big transition with potentially, fingers crossed, moving into a new footprint within city limits of Boston, which I'm thrilled. I am beyond joy for. Yes.
But it takes a lot of lead work and a lot of sharing of that passion. And, I go for the fences because I'm going to get rejected, but why not? It might be a yes. And this time it was a no, but the person was able to kept me on the phone. So I respected that. PR businessman, just trying to talk about real estate and potentials. I got some interesting information. So I'm like, okay, now I'm better prepared for the next time. So let's talk about Artisans Asylum.
Let's talk. I love Artisans. Artisans is such an amazing space. And I remember when you first told me about it, I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. I'm not sure. Maybe it connects to my values around economic impact and community involvement and giving back and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, let me learn a little bit more. But to be truthful, even though I was already, I would say 90% there after our conversations, being in the space, just being surrounded by all of that art and all of those creations, oh my gosh, it just blew my mind. I was at 90% and then it took me to 350. I was like, is this possible? I remember telling the executive director, who's amazing, by the way, Lars, I was like, this is a museum. And I had no idea that this incredible oasis of creators existed. And it even blew my mind because, me not necessarily being in the arts and makerspace world, I was just thinking of, maybe woodworking, painting, and who knows, maybe a sculpture, that's it. And in there, I was able to see people just, working with marble or working with the wire hanging art that one of our other members does. Oh my gosh, I'm so obsessed with it. I've actually taken so many pictures of things around Artisans and I just have them on my phone or my screensavers. And people are like, wow, what museum is that? And I'm like, that is called Artisans Asylum. We're in Somerville right now. Come through. And you know what? And I love it because it's just so open to everyone and anyone. And it reminds me of the incredible people that I know, who are leaving jobs in Peru and the Ukraine and other countries where they were seamstresses or they were artists or, they were sculptors. They worked with their hands. They created different things. Now that they're in this country, they don't have the ability to buy all of that machinery or they don't have the space to continue their art. So this serves almost as their room, their little laboratory, their garage for them to come in and explore and continue that passion of doing things with their hands and creating robots or creating tapestry. And it's just so beautiful because it's just food for the soul. So Artisans is one of those places that I've been telling all my friends, I'm like, listen, even if you don't want to do the classes, you're not interested in art, just go and walk around.
Yeah.
Because you leave that place feeling so empowered. It's incredible.
And we also have the speaker series where artists get to talk about their medium, get to talk about their art, get to talk about kind of their inspiration and how it translated, right? How this thought turned into a thing, right? And it translates to, your venture. You had a thought and you translated it into a business, whether it's a digital kind of startup-y space or whether it's a physical, tangible, art medium. It sparks that possibility. I ask all my guests what their favorite art is. There's a quote from Darren Walker, who I absolutely adore this quote. He said, "Without art, there is no empathy. And without empathy, there is no justice."
Oof. Now you made me nervous. I was like, man, yeah, wow, that is a beautiful quote.
And there's so many mediums.
Yeah, there's so many mediums. And recently I actually wrote an article on supporting Black, especially Black trans artists, creators, bakers, vendors. And I just love how, especially in the Black and Brown community, we've been able to, I feel like our resilience has also been able to come through our music, our art, our creations. Even a lot of the things that were, a lot of the art that before was called ghetto, braids or like the hoop earrings or whatever aesthetics, like people are now, you see it now on, Balmain's runway. You see it on Versace's runway. And now things are being appropriated by these other people. And now it's fun. Now it's artistic. But it's like, this has always been our art. This has been our way to survive and express and show the beauty in just the whole, our beings, the whole community. I always was fascinated by just surrealist art. By a lot of wartime art, especially resistance art. I would have to say, like, one of my favorite artists for a very long time was Salvador Dali. Yeah. Definitely has his issues. Racism. He's a problem. He's one of those people we call problematic fave. Very problematic. But the reason why I really loved, his art, the melting clocks, the surrealists, was just because him, similar to Picasso, they were just coming at a time when people wanted things to just be very like beautiful and pleasant. And he put unpleasant things in front of them.
Love it.
And then they made this art, they put it in museums. But at the end of the day, when you look at some of his work, it doesn't necessarily make you feel fuzzy inside. I feel like sometimes people who have been historically disenfranchised or marginalized, we have thought that a way to be included and embraced is by being beautiful, by agreeing.
Fit into a norm.
Yes.
And you'll be accepted. Oh, that's tragic.
By being pleasant, by speaking proper.
Yeah.
And not necessarily speaking in the way that you want to speak.
Truthful and tragic at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly. Or just being authentically you. And I feel like with his art, the fact that he was able to create some crazy paintings and they're hung in a museum. And when he had some issues, he created his own museum. I love the fearlessness. And that is something that whenever I'm teaching, I try to instill in my students. Be fearless, be whoever you are. If your investment strategy is stocks or real estate or you want to do something completely different, do it. Discover a whole new way of making money. Like put just who you are out there. Yeah. And if people don't embrace you, then they are not your people. That's okay. Yeah. That's okay. So that is part of the reason why I really love, art that is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing or makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, but really has you confront a particular reality or has you think about certain things that are not always top of mind. And then post artisans, one of the people in my top 3 is actually Ariel Matisse. Yes. So I fell in love with her art. She does a lot of different sculptures. My favorite things that she does are the wire sculptures. To see her transform something so ordinary into these beautiful creations, whether it's a face, a horse, tree, a whole forest with just wire. I remember when I went to Artisans and Lawyers was showing me around, I stood in her workspace and I was just like, who did this? How is this possible? I had no idea who she was. That was just so impressed not only by her talent, but also by just the creativity of humans. And it was one of those things where it's like, you know, I remember being in elementary school, middle school, and seeing kids just playing around, fidgeting with, you know, either wire or with clay or with like, there were these like little plastic cords that we would like just interweave and whatever. And I wonder how many of those kids still do that. I wonder how many of those kids are selling their art. I wonder how many of those kids have abandoned. And I feel that probably 99% of those kids, now adults, have abandoned that art.
There's so many, I agree with you. There's so many adults that have stifled their creativity. And I'm like, no, it's in there. Let it out. You are all creative. There is a place for you. Not only do adults need creativity, but youth do as well. And we need to encourage that in the youth to help them keep creating.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I speak with a lot of different families, I do ask about what is the culture that you're coming from? You know, and even like with their religious beliefs, what are their religious beliefs? Because I've noticed that sometimes they have cut some of their kids' dreams short because they feel that it is in disagreement with their religious beliefs, right? So it's coming out of a place of love in a way, right? Yep. So I've had to have conversations with them with like, you know, hey, being a singer does not mean that you will be in bars singing every night and that you're going to be in an environment where you may get shot or your kid will be in danger, whatever the case.
Challenge your moral fabric. Like there's options.
Right. Exactly. So it's like even having these open conversations have been really helpful for them to understand like, oh, these things can coexist. Because I feel at times like a lot of us, just for survival, you know, because we come from certain backgrounds where maybe we were poor or maybe we had absent, even physically or mentally, emotionally absent parents, and we want to be the opposite of that. We then sometimes treat the world as black and white, and we make these super regimented lives for ourselves. And once we, let's say, get into the middle class or whatever the case may be, we continue rising, we put that same, you know, those blinders on our kids because this is the way that I succeeded. So this is the way that you will succeed. And it's like, you know, I've had to learn as well, like some of the things that help me survive the hood and the village and all that are things that I have to like acknowledge, clap for them, thank them. And then as I evolve, I'm going to have to adopt a different skill set. And
beautiful.
I'm going to adopt a different mindset. And the same thing once I get to the next point. Like, I think that there is definitely, and that is something that I've had to learn. And once I learned it, I started sharing it. And it was incredible how so many people were like, wow, actually, yeah, you're right. Like, why am I still, like, I'm comfortable. Why am I still operating with this, like, you're hungry, survival, and putting this pressure that is absolutely unnecessary on my kids or on people around me. So absolutely, you know, to your point, I do think it's extremely important to understand the cultural environment and that belief system and the value system, and just have open conversations with people around, hey, profitability, you know, it's not the devil. You can actually mix a passion and still be successful in this way or in that way.
Yeah. Pamela, I really appreciate chatting with you. I hope our listeners and our audience learned something. I can't wait to see you in person once we're done with this time of quarantine.
I can't wait to see you. And I definitely want to just, you know, encourage the listeners to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Rosenna Real Estate, ROCENA, and continue striving and being fearless and just going for your dreams. Because if you get a no, that doesn't matter. The possibility of a yes is stronger than all of that.
Exactly. There is always the option for yes. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you, Rachel. Bye,
Take care. Thank you for joining us on the PeopleNova Podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill. The team here at PeopleNova Human Capital would love to hear from you. We are always curious to hear from our listeners. So go ahead and send us an email, podcast@peoplenovahc.com, with your workplace questions or suggestions for who you'd like to see on our show. If you send us an audio memo, we may include your question on the show. Lastly, we are here to amplify. Our guests are amazing entrepreneurs And we want you to forward our newsletter to someone in your network who needs to know the amazing things our guests are doing, so together we can make an impact. Thank you so much. Take care, and we will see you next time.